Heartbroken and penniless, a widow and her children were evicted, finding refuge in a rusted school bus. Little did they know that this metal giant, abandoned by all, held a secret capable of changing their lives forever. Night swallowed the last vestiges of light, and the wind, a constant lament, whistled through the bus's cracks. Outside, rain hammered relentlessly on the metal roof, creating a symphony of despair that Mary knew all too well. Her children, Peter and Anne, slept huddled in the makeshift seats, their young faces marked by exhaustion and uncertainty. Mary, however, couldn't rest. The image of the bailiff's cold face, their bags strewn on the street, the public humiliation, it all burned in her memory. She needed to make that place, however precarious, a safe home. With a dim flashlight, she knelt on the floor, determined to secure a loose board that creaked with every step. The smell of rusted metal and mold was thick, but she ignored it, focusing on the task. Her fingers traced the rough surface of the wood, searching for nails or screws that could be tightened. That's when she felt it. It wasn't just a loose board. There seemed to be an empty space underneath. The cold metal of the floor gave slightly under her knees, and a muffled sound like wood scraping against metal made her heart race. An instinctive curiosity propelled her. With her fingertips, she probed the edge of the board, feeling an almost imperceptible gap. The wood was dirty, encrusted with years of dust and debris, but the gap was there, like an ancient scar. With considerable effort, Mary forced the board upwards. A sharp creak echoed in the bus's silence, making her hold her breath, fearing she would wake the children. Slowly, the board lifted, revealing a dark, deep opening. The cold air from the hidden compartment rose, bringing with it a strange smell, a mix of earth, old paper, and something metallic. Mary's heart pounded erratically in her chest. What could it be? A hiding place for old toys, forgotten tools. With a trembling hand, she shined the flashlight inside. The light danced over a tangle of faded cloths, which seemed to protect something. Carefully, she pulled out the first bundle. It was a heavy, faded blue fabric, and inside it, something hard and weighty. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the cloth. The flashlight's beam revealed a stack of $100 bills, piled and held by a rubber band, then another and another. The money, in large quantities, seemed to glow in the dim light. Mary blinked, incredulous. Her eyes widened. It was a fortune. She continued to pull out the bundles. A small leather case revealed a pearl necklace that shimmered softly, a ring with an emerald stone that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and a pair of diamond earrings that reflected the flashlight's beam in tiny rainbows. Priceless jewels, more than she had ever seen in her entire life. But what intrigued her most was the last bundle, a large yellowed envelope. Inside, there were several documents, some handwritten in elegant script, others printed with official seals. Her eyes scanned the words, trying to decipher the mystery. They were bank papers, wills, and an old diary. The name Professor Arthur Valerius appeared repeatedly. The documents revealed that the bus, the very bus that had become her refuge, belonged to him. An eccentric man, with no known heirs, who had hidden his wealth there with a peculiar clause in his will. To he who, in their greatest need, finds hope in this humble refuge and proves worthy of its keeping. The words danced before Mary's eyes. Worthy, hope. That bus, which she had seen as a symbol of her humiliation and misery, was in fact a treasure. It wasn't a punishment, but a providence. Tears, long held back, streamed down her face, hot and abundant. They were not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief, of a hope that seemed to have risen from the ashes. The wind's howl outside now seemed like a hymn, and the sound of the rain, a melody of an uncertain but now perhaps brilliant future. She looked at her sleeping children, her heart filling with an emotion she hadn't felt in a long time, the promise of a tomorrow. The bus's secret wasn't just money and jewels, it was the key to a new life, an unexpected miracle that transformed desolation into destiny. A quiet reverence filled the bus, replacing the despair that had previously inhabited it. Mary remained kneeling, her eyes fixed on the stacks of money and the jewels that gleamed in the dim light. The yellowed envelope with Professor Valerius's documents rested in her trembling hands, a silent testament to poetic justice. The tears dried on her cheeks, leaving a salty trail and a strange warmth. A mix of relief and awe spread through her chest. How was it possible? Such a grand miracle, hidden beneath the rubble of her own ruin. Night advanced, but sleep seemed a distant memory. She carefully placed the money and jewels back into the compartment, covering them with the faded cloths. The creaking board was replaced, and Mary made sure it was as firm as before, perfectly concealing the secret. The bus, once a symbol of her shame, was now a vault, a sanctuary of hope. When the first rays of sun peeked through the dusty windows, painting the bus's interior with shades of orange and grey, Mary was still awake. Her body ached from the uncomfortable position, but her mind buzzed with plans and questions. How would she use that fortune? The professor had left a condition: to be worthy. What did it mean to be worthy of such an inheritance? A small yawn from the makeshift seats broke the silence. Peter stretched his arms, his eyes still heavy with sleep, and Anne stirred beside him. "Mommy!" Peter's sleepy voice called. "Has the rain stopped?" Mary turned, a gentle smile, yet laden with new determination, illuminating her face. "It has, my love. The sun is already rising." She approached her children, embracing them with renewed strength. The smell of metal and mold still lingered in the air, but now it seemed less oppressive. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Anne said, rubbing her eyes. Hunger, a cruel reality that the treasure couldn't immediately erase. Mary felt a knot in her throat. She had a fortune, but she couldn't simply go to a store and spend stacks of money without raising suspicion. Discretion was crucial. The world that had cast her out could try to take what she had found. She needed a plan, and she needed to act intelligently. The first step, she decided, would be the simplest: feeding her children. With hands still slightly trembling, she took one of the stacks of $100 bills, removed just a few notes, and hid them in her coat pocket. The rest was carefully put back. "Come on, my loves," she said, her voice trying to sound normal. "Let's find something to eat, and then Mommy has a story to tell you, a story about a bus and a very special professor." Curiosity shone in Peter's eyes. A professor? Did he live here? Mary smiled, a genuine smile she hadn't felt in a long time. "In a way, yes. He left something very important for us." She knew she couldn't reveal everything at once. The magnitude of the discovery would be too much for the children and for herself. It would be a process. Stepping out of the bus, the morning air was cold and damp, but the sun was already beginning to warm the earth. The vacant lot looked the same, but for Mary, everything had changed. The weeds, the dirt, the rusted bus, all were now part of a landscape that harbored a wonderful secret. She looked at the bus with new eyes, no longer with shame, but with an almost reverent respect. It was more than a shelter. It was a guardian, a gift. Her mind was already charting the first steps. She needed a safe place to keep the money, perhaps a bank in a neighboring town where she wouldn't be recognized. She needed to research Professor Valerius further, to better understand the clause in his will. And above all, she needed to start transforming that bus into a real home, a home worthy of the hope it had brought. The journey would be long, but for the first time in a long time, Mary didn't feel the weight of despair, but the lightness of possibility. With a hand of each child in hers, she walked towards the small neighborhood grocery store, feeling the warmth of the bills in her pocket, the first step into a new life born from the ashes. The wind, which had once howled in lament, now seemed to whisper promises of a future. The morning breeze, still fresh, caressed Mary's face as she and her children walked down the dusty street. The sun, now higher, spread a gentle warmth over the vacant lot, transforming the previously desolate landscape into something almost welcoming. Peter and Anne, their small hands nestled in hers, skipped lightly, oblivious to the whirlwind of thoughts stirring in their mother's mind. The aroma of fresh bread and coffee, wafting from the grocery store a few blocks away, was a comforting invitation. Mary felt the weight of the bills in her coat pocket, not as a burden, but as a promise. Each step was imbued with a new dignity, a confidence she hadn't felt in a long time. As they entered the small grocery store, the bell on the door tinkled softly, announcing their arrival. Mr. Henderson, the owner, a man with a wrinkled face and tired eyes, looked up from his newspaper. His gaze, which used to carry a hint of pity, now seemed merely curious. "Good morning, Mary," he said, his voice hoarse. "Are the children well?" "Good morning, Mr. Henderson. We're all well, thank you," Mary replied, striving to make her voice sound casual. She picked up a basket and began filling it with bread, milk, some fruit, and a piece of cheese. Simple gestures, once unthinkable, now performed with a naturalness that surprised her. Peter and Anne pointed to the colorful candies on the shelf, and Mary, with a genuine smile, allowed them to choose a small packet of cookies. The cost, once an insurmountable barrier, was now an insignificant detail. When paying, she handed him one of the $100 bills. Mr. Henderson examined it for an instant, then accepted it without question, handing back the change. The transaction, mundane for many, was a milestone for Mary. It was tangible proof that her future had changed. Back at the bus, the smell of fresh food filled the space, muffling the odor of mold and metal. The children devoured their breakfast with ravenous appetites, their laughter filling the bus with a long-forgotten melody. Mary watched them, her heart overflowing with gratitude and fierce determination. She would tell them the professor's story, yes, but not now. The full truth needed time to be digested, first by her, then by them. There was still much to do. The money was a blessing, but also a responsibility. She couldn't simply go out buying a house or a car. Discretion was her greatest ally. The world that had cast her out could just as easily try to steal what she had found. She needed a plan, and she needed information. "Peter, Anne, can you play inside for a bit while Mummy organizes some things?" Mary asked as she put away the groceries. "Can we draw?" Anne asked, her eyes shining. "Of course, my loves," she replied, handing them a piece of paper and some pencils that had survived the eviction. Once the children were engrossed in their drawings, Mary pulled the yellowed envelope from the secret compartment. Professor Arthur Valerius's documents. She needed to understand every word, every clause. There was a diary, written in elegant, slightly faded script. The first pages spoke of travels, passions for history and archaeology, and a deep disillusionment with human greed. The professor seemed to have isolated himself from the world, but not before conceiving a plan for his fortune. Reading the last entries, Mary discovered that the professor had bought the bus with the intention of transforming it into a mobile research studio. However, a sudden illness prevented him from realizing his dream. He had hidden his fortune there, trusting that only a truly needy and pure-hearted soul would find it. The main clause of the will was clear. The fortune would belong to whoever discovered the secret compartment and proved worthy, using the resources for good, not merely for personal luxury. Mary felt a shiver. dignity. The professor didn't want the money to go to someone who would squander it, but to someone who would use it to build something meaningful. She looked around the bus, at the broken windows, the torn seats, the roof that still leaked in places. The first step, she decided, would be to transform that refuge into a real home, a symbol of her new life and the responsibility the professor had entrusted to her. But first, she needed a safe place for the treasure. A bank in a neighboring town where no one knew her would be ideal. She would need documents, perhaps a new identity, to start from scratch, away from curious eyes. The idea of going to a library to research the professor and how to manage such a large inheritance began to take shape in her mind. The wind outside, which had once seemed a lament, now whispered promises of a future. Mary picked up one of the stacks of money, feeling it in her hands. It wasn't just paper, it was the key to a new life, a chance to start over, not just for her, but for her children. She looked at Peter and Anne, who were laughing as they colored, and felt renewed strength. The journey would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, Mary was not alone. She had a purpose, a secret, and the promise of a tomorrow. The situation, however, demanded immediate and calculated action. Mary knew that the fortune, miraculous as it was, brought with it immense responsibility. She couldn't risk her children's safety or her own with ill-considered moves. Discretion was her strongest armor against the world that had hurt her. As Peter and Anne remained engrossed in their drawings, their soft laughter punctuating the bus's silence, Mary carefully folded the professor's documents. The diary, with its elegant script, revealed not only Arthur Valerius's eccentric personality, but also the depth of his vision. The dignity clause echoed in her mind. How would she prove worthy? The answer seemed to lie in every small choice she would make from that moment on. The first step, she decided, would be information. A library in a neighboring town, where no one knew her, would be the ideal refuge for her research. She needed to understand inheritance laws, the professor's history, and how to protect that fortune without raising suspicion. But first, the bus needed to be more than a temporary shelter. It needed to be a home, a safe sanctuary for the treasure and for her family. With a minimal portion of the money she had set aside, Mary decided to make a small foray to the nearest hardware store. She needed tools, boards to cover the broken windows, tarps for the roof, and a sturdy padlock for the door. The idea was to make the bus look less abandoned, less vulnerable, but without attracting excessive attention. "My loves, Mommy needs to go out for a few hours," Mary said, kneeling to be at her children's height. "You stay here playing, while I go buy some things to make our little house prettier and safer." Peter's eyes lit up. "Are you buying paint, Mommy? To paint the bus?" Mary smiled, a warmth spreading in her chest. "Perhaps one day, my love. For now, let's make it more comfortable inside." She kissed each of their foreheads, feeling the softness of their hair. That was her purpose, her dignity, their well-being. Leaving the bus, Mary felt a flutter in her stomach, a mix of fear and excitement. She had changed, wearing the most discreet clothes she owned, and hid the rest of the stack of money in an internal pocket hastily sewn. The backpack on her back, empty, would serve to carry the purchases. The hardware store was a labyrinth of wood, metal, and oil smells. The clinking of tools and the hum of electric saws filled the air. Mary, with a mental list, moved with determination. She bought wooden boards, a roll of waterproof tarp, nails, a hammer, a hand drill, and a large padlock with a chain. Each item was chosen with care, visualizing the bus's transformation. Back at the vacant lot, the sun was already leaning west, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. Peter and Anne greeted her with tight hugs. "Mommy, you're back," Anne exclaimed, "and I brought many things for our home," Mary replied, placing the backpack and boards on the ground. That afternoon, Mary worked tirelessly. The sound of the hammer hitting nails echoed inside the bus, a constant rhythm of construction and hope. She used the boards to cover the broken windows, securing them from the inside for greater safety and insulation. The tarp was stretched over the most damaged parts of the roof, preventing moisture and wind from entering. The padlock was fixed to the door, a symbolic gesture, but one that brought a sense of protection. The bus was still a bus, but now, with the windows sealed and the roof patched, it seemed less like an abandoned shell and more like a cocoon, a refuge. The smell of new wood mingled with that of metal and mold, a fragrance of change. Exhausted, but with deep satisfaction, Mary prepared a simple dinner with what was left of the morning's groceries. As her children ate, she told them more about the professor who lived on the bus, describing him as a wise man who loved history and secrets. She didn't mention the treasure, but the seed of curiosity and admiration was planted. That night, the wind still howled outside, but its sound was muffled by the boards and the tarp. The rain, if it came, would no longer find so many passages. Mary lay down between her children, feeling the warmth of their small bodies. The bus, once a symbol of misery, was now a testament to her resilience. The metal walls seemed to whisper promises, not just of a safer future, but of a future built with purpose and dignity. Tomorrow, she would go to the library. Tomorrow, the search for truth and the right path would truly begin. The morning sun, still shy, peeked through the cracks in the boards that now covered the bus windows, drawing golden stripes on the floor. The smell of new wood, an aroma of progress, hung in the air. Mary got up before the children, preparing a simple coffee with the last provisions. The promise of the previous day echoed in her mind. The library, the search for truth. "Mummy's going out again, my loves," she said, as Peter and Anne rubbed their eyes, waking up. "I'm going to look for some information that will help us make our little house even better." She kissed her children's foreheads, feeling the familiar warmth. The backpack on her back, now lighter, seemed to carry not only her few belongings, but also the weight of an uncertain future and the hope of a new beginning. The sturdy padlock on the bus door, a symbol of protection, clicked as she closed it. The walk to the neighboring town was long, but Mary didn't feel the fatigue. Each step was fueled by a mix of adrenaline and purpose. She observed the people, the cars, the houses, a world that once seemed distant to her and now opened up like a map of possibilities. The municipal library was a refuge of silence and knowledge. The smell of aged paper and furniture polish enveloped Mary as she passed through the solid wooden doors. The soft rustle of turning pages and the faint click of keyboards were the only sounds. She felt small, yet at the same time incredibly powerful, knowing that there, among those infinite shelves, she could find the answers she sought. With a strongly beating heart, Mary headed to the computers. She typed Professor Arthur Valerius into the search field. Results quickly appeared. A flood of information she began to absorb eagerly. Old newspaper articles, academic publications, even a profile on a genealogy website. Professor Valerius was indeed a notable figure, a renowned historian and archaeologist, known for his unorthodox theories and his passion for ancient civilizations. He had lectured at a prestigious university for many years, but his retirement was marked by increasing isolation. The articles spoke of his eccentricity, his aversion to modern society, and notably, his lack of direct heirs. A brief note mentioned the sale of his main property years before his death, and his move to a more reclusive lifestyle. Mary found an obituary that confirmed his death about 5 years prior due to a sudden illness. There was no mention of a will or public inheritance. This confirmed the validity of the diary and the documents she had found. The professor had indeed vanished from the radar, taking the secret of his fortune with him. Research into inheritance laws and unconventional wills was more complex. Mary found herself immersed in legal terms she barely understood. Holographic will, testamentary trust, adverse possession. Her head began to ache. What she did understand, however, was that a will, like the professor's, hidden and conditional, could be contested. The dignity he required was not just a moral issue, it needed to be proven, perhaps even legally. One article in particular caught her attention: challenges in unconventional inheritances, the role of proof and discretion. The text discussed cases where wills were found in unusual circumstances and the need for a specialized lawyer capable of navigating murky legal waters without attracting unwanted attention. The article cited a law firm in a larger city, about 60 miles away, known for its discretion and expertise in complex and delicate cases. The name of the principal lawyer, Dr. Eleanor Vance, was mentioned as an expert in probate law with an impeccable reputation. Mary felt a shiver. That was the way. She needed someone like Dr. Vance. But how to approach such a renowned lawyer without exposing her vulnerable situation? She couldn't simply show up with a fortune hidden in a bus. Discretion was, as always, her greatest ally. She carefully wrote down the firm's name and contact information. The sun was already setting when Mary left the library, the golden light of dusk painting the streets. Physical exhaustion was great, but her mind buzzed with new information and a more concrete plan. The professor didn't just want the money to be found, he wanted it to be used with wisdom and purpose. And for that, Mary now realized, she would need professional help. Back at the bus, the air was fresher and the silence seemed cozier. Peter and Anne were already asleep, nestled against each other. Mary watched them, feeling the responsibility weigh on her, but also her determination strengthen. She wasn't just seeking an inheritance, she was building a legacy. The next stage would be the most challenging, finding Dr. Eleanor Vance and presenting her case, without revealing more than strictly necessary. The journey to the big city, to the lawyer's office, would be the next step, a leap of faith towards a future that, though still uncertain, now seemed more tangible. The following morning brought with it a tense quietude. The sun, still pale, peeked through the boards, drawing stripes of light on the bus floor. Mary had slept little, her mind buzzing with the day's plan. The trip to the big city, the meeting with Dr. Eleanor Vance, seemed like an abyss to be crossed. She needed to be strong, convincing, but above all, discreet. "My loves, Mommy will need to be out for a longer time today," Mary said, as she prepared a simple breakfast. The smell of stale bread and instant coffee filled the space. Peter and Anne, still sleepy, watched her with curious eyes. "I'm going to sort out some important things for our little house, so it can be even safer, and so we can have a beautiful future." The decision to leave them alone was the most painful. She had reinforced the padlock, instructed them not to open the door to anyone, and to play quietly inside the bus. She left them a small stock of cookies and water and a storybook she had found among the professor's belongings. "Promise you'll take care, okay?" Mary's voice trembled slightly. Peter, with the seriousness of a small adult, nodded. "We will, Mommy, don't worry." Anne just hugged her tightly, her face buried in Mary's worn clothes. The warmth of the child's embrace was both a balm and a burden. It was for them that she was doing all this. Mary left the bus, the click of the padlock echoing in her ears. The backpack on her back felt heavier, laden not with possessions, but with the responsibility of an uncertain future. She walked to the edge of the main road, where she would wait for an intercity bus. The cold morning wind whipped at her face, and the distant roar of cars on the highway seemed like a call to the unknown. The journey was long and tiring. The bus rattled, and the hum of the engine was a constant sound. Mary watched the rural landscape gradually transform into suburbs and finally into the concrete jungle of the big city. Tall buildings scraped the sky. Traffic was an incessant river of metal and horns, and the crowds on the sidewalks moved with a haste that made her feel like a stranger. Dr. Eleanor Vance's office was in an imposing skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. The polished marble of the lobby reflected the light, and the scent of cleanliness and luxury was almost overwhelming. Mary felt a knot in her throat. Her simple clothes and worn backpack contrasted sharply with the environment. She approached the reception desk, where an elegantly dressed woman typed on a keyboard, the soft sound of the keys filling the air. "Excuse me," Mary began, her voice a little softer than expected. "I'd like to speak with Dr. Eleanor Vance." The receptionist looked up, a polite but slightly distant expression on her face. "Dr. Vance is in meetings all day. Do you have an appointment?" Mary swallowed hard. "No, I don't. It's a matter of extreme urgency and delicacy. I heard Dr. Vance specializes in unconventional cases." The receptionist frowned slightly. "All our cases are handled with the utmost discretion, madam. Can I schedule a consultation for next week?" "I understand," Mary insisted, feeling despair begin to set in. "But it's about an inheritance from a distant relative, Professor Arthur Valerius. I found documents that indicate a will, but it's private. I need someone with Dr. Vance's reputation and experience to guide me without raising suspicion." She used the words she had rehearsed, trying to sound as articulate as possible. The professor's name seemed to have a slight effect. The receptionist hesitated for a moment, her eyes assessing Mary more closely. "Professor Arthur Valerius, the historian?" "Yes, that's him." Mary confirmed, a ray of hope igniting in her chest. "Please have a seat, madam. I'll check if Dr. Vance has a brief interval." The receptionist made a quick call, her voice a discreet murmur. Mary sat in a soft leather armchair, her heart pounding in her chest. The ticking of a wall clock was the only audible sound. Minutes that felt like hours passed. Finally, the receptionist called her. "Dr. Vance can see you for a few minutes. Please follow me." Mary followed the receptionist down a silent corridor, the scent of fresh coffee wafting through the air. The door opened to a spacious office with a stunning view of the city. Behind a dark wooden desk sat Dr. Eleanor Vance. Her graying hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and her blue eyes, behind thin glasses, observed Mary with penetrating intelligence. "Madame," Dr. Vance began, gesturing to the chair opposite the desk. Mary Smith, Ms. Smith." The receptionist mentioned a matter related to Professor Arthur Valerius. "I am familiar with his work. How can I help you?" The lawyer's voice was calm and professional, but with undeniable authority. Mary took a deep breath. "Dr. Vance, I found some documents that suggest Professor Valerius left an inheritance for someone he considered worthy. It's a very peculiar will, and the way it was found is unusual. I need legal guidance to understand the validity of these documents and how to proceed without attracting unwanted attention." Dr. Vance listened attentively, without interrupting, her fingers lightly tapping on the table. "I see. And where are these documents, Ms. Smith?" Mary hesitated. "They are in a safe place. I couldn't bring them here without first having a guarantee of confidentiality and an understanding of how we can protect them." She knew this was the riskiest part, the one that could make her seem like a lunatic or a fraudster. Dr. Vance stared at her for a long moment, her eyes scrutinizing Mary. The silence in the office was thick. Finally, the lawyer nodded slowly. "I understand your caution, Ms. Smith. Cases of unconventional inheritances can be complex. My reputation is based on discretion and effectiveness. If what you describe is true and the documents are legitimate, we can explore the options. She picked up a card and slid it across the table. This is my direct contact. Call me tomorrow morning. We need to schedule a formal consultation so you can present the documents to me with all legal guarantees. And Ms. Smith, please be as discreet as possible about this matter. Mary took the card, feeling the smooth paper between her fingers. Immense relief washed over her, mixed with the awareness that the real challenge was just beginning. Thank you very much, Dr. Vance. I will call. As she left the office, Mary felt the weight of the world lighten a little. She had taken the first crucial step. The city, once a labyrinth, now seemed like a path, though still full of twists and challenges. The hum of traffic and the distant sound of sirens seemed less threatening. The journey back to the bus, to her children, would be long. But now she carried not only hope, but a tangible plan. Professor Valerius had planted a seed of trust in her path, and Dr. Vance seemed to be the right person to help her cultivate it. The journey back was a blur of exhaustion and relief. The intercity bus rattled, each jolt echoing the rhythm of Mary's heart. The landscape that had once seemed hostile now transformed into a path back home, to her children, to the makeshift refuge that held the key to her future. The sun was already setting when she got off at the edge of the main road, the cold night wind enveloping her. The distant sound of cars on the highway was a constant murmur as she hurried towards the vacant lot. As she approached the bus, the night silence was broken only by the rustle of dry leaves under her feet. The padlock she had left was intact. A sigh of relief escaped her lips. She opened the door, and the sweet smell of children's sleep, mixed with the aroma of earth and metal, enveloped her. Peter and Anne slept soundly, nestled against each other under a thin blanket. Mary watched them for a long moment, the pale moonlight entering through the cracks in the boards, drawing dancing shadows on their angelic faces. For them, she would face the world. The night was short and restless. Mary barely slept, her mind buzzing with the details of the next day. She needed to prepare the documents. Carefully, she removed the floorboards, revealing the secret compartment. The treasure gleamed faintly in the flashlight's beam. She separated the professor's documents, the peculiar will, the letters, the bus's property records, and other papers detailing his fortune and intentions. She placed them in a simple folder she had bought in the city, ensuring they were organized and protected, but without drawing attention. The money and jewels, she knew, would have to wait. The first step was legal validation. The following morning brought with it a dense fog that hung over the vacant lot. The air was damp and cold. Mary, with the folder under her arm and a heavy heart, kissed her sleeping children. "Mommy will be back soon, my loves," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The click of the padlock as she closed the bus door sounded heavier than ever. The trip back to the big city was less agonizing, but the tension remained. Each mile brought her closer to the moment of truth. Upon arriving at the imposing skyscraper, Mary felt the same sense of displacement, but this time there was an iron determination in her eyes. The receptionist, seeing her, offered a more welcoming smile. "Dr. Vance is waiting, Ms. Smith." Mary followed the familiar path to the lawyer's office. The scent of fresh coffee was stronger today. Dr. Eleanor Vance sat at her desk, her blue eyes fixed on Mary as she entered. "Good morning, Ms. Smith. Please have a seat. I imagine you've brought the documents." And the lawyer's voice was professional, but with a tone of expectation. Mary nodded, the folder in her hands, seeming to weigh a ton. She placed it carefully on the dark wooden desk. "Yes, Dr. Vance, they are all here." The lawyer took the folder, her movements precise and methodical. She opened it and began to leaf through the papers, her eyes scanning each line, each signature. The silence in the office was so profound that Mary could hear the soft rustle of paper being turned. The ticking of the wall clock seemed amplified. Mary watched Dr. Vance's face, trying to decipher her expressions. First, a slightly arched eyebrow, then a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Her fingers stopped at a particular document, a manuscript in Professor Valerius's peculiar handwriting. "This is quite an unusual will, Miss Smith," Dr. Vance finally said, her eyes lifting to meet Mary's. "It details not only the distribution of a considerable fortune, but also the conditions for whoever found it, and the place of discovery, the school bus." She paused, her eyes scrutinizing Mary. "Could you explain to me in detail how you found these documents and the bus?" Mary took a deep breath, the words she had rehearsed the night before echoing in her mind. "Dr. Vance, after losing my husband and being evicted from my home, my children and I found ourselves homeless. We were desperate. We found this abandoned school bus in a vacant lot. It was in ruins, but it was the only shelter we had." She paused, her voice choked with emotion and the rawness of the truth. "While trying to make it minimally habitable for my children, fixing the floor, I discovered a secret compartment. Inside were these documents and the rest of the inheritance." Dr. Vance listened attentively, without interrupting, the expression on her face growing more serious. "I see. So, you found the bus, and inside it, the documents that reveal the bus itself is part of the inheritance, along with the other assets." "Exactly. The documents explain that Professor Valerius left it for someone who demonstrated resilience and purpose, someone who would find it and transform it from a symbol of abandonment into a home or a refuge. He ironically called it a punishment house in one of his letters. He wanted the worthy person to find it." The lawyer nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the documents. "It's a will, with a discovery and purpose clause, very much in Professor Valerius's style indeed. He was always known for his eccentricity and his belief in merit and poetic justice." She closed the folder, her eyes now firm and determined. "Miss Smith, these documents appear legitimate at first glance. The peculiarity of the will and the manner of discovery will require a very careful approach. We first need to verify the authenticity of all signatures and seals and initiate a formal search for other possible heirs, although the professor was known to have no close relatives." She leaned forward slightly. "However, the most crucial point now is the security of these assets. You cannot continue to keep the money and jewels in the bus. We need to transfer these assets to a secure account and a bank vault as quickly as possible. And the story of how you found the bus will need to be presented strategically to avoid unnecessary questioning. We will prove that you did not trespass, but rather found an abandoned property that, by chance, contained an inheritance intended for whoever found it under certain conditions." Mary felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The path would be long, but Dr. Vance seemed to be the ally she needed. "And the bus, Dr. Vance? It's our home now." Dr. Vance smiled slightly. "If the will is validated, Mrs. Smith, the bus will also legally be yours. But for now, let's focus on securing the main inheritance and your safety. As of today, you are my client, and everything discussed here is under professional confidentiality." She extended her hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Smith. It seems Professor Valerius found his worthy person." Mary shook the lawyer's hand, feeling the firmness of the grip. A new chapter had truly begun. The weight of responsibility was still immense, but now she was not alone. There was concrete hope, a plan, and a hand extended to guide her through the turbulent waters ahead. As she left Dr. Vance's office, Mary felt the city's fresh breeze like a balm. The morning sun, which had once seemed indifferent, now bathed the streets with a golden promise. She carried not only the folder with the documents, but a sense of renewed purpose. The first step, the most difficult, had been taken. Dr. Vance had been clear. The security of the assets was paramount. The money and jewels in the bus were a risk they could no longer afford. Mary knew she needed to act quickly, but with the utmost discretion. The journey back to the vacant lot was filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. How would she transport such a large sum of money and jewels without raising suspicion? Dr. Vance had suggested a solution, a discreet, armored transport service, but Mary felt that, for the initial move, the task should be hers, to protect the confidentiality of the bus's location. Arriving at the bus, the silence of the vacant lot enveloped her. The smell of metal and earth was the perfume of her home, a home that would soon cease to be just a refuge, to become the starting point of a new life. Peter and Anne greeted her with tight hugs, their small faces smiling. Mary embraced them, her heart overflowing with love and new determination. "Mommy has good news, my loves," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Things are going to get much better for us. Much, much better." Anne's eyes sparkled. "Are we going to have a real house, Mommy?" Mary smiled, a smile that for the first time in a long time reached her eyes. "Yes, my daughter, a real house and many other things." That afternoon, Mary explained to her children that they would need to go on a special trip the next day. She couldn't reveal the true nature of the task to them, but the joy in their eyes was contagious. They were excited by the idea of an adventure. When night fell and the children were asleep, Mary lit her small flashlight and, with her heart pounding, lifted the floorboards. The gleam of the jewels and the bulk of the stacks of money seemed even more intense in the dim light. She had bought a large, simple backpack in the city, and now, with steady hands, she began to transfer the treasure. Each stack of bills, each shimmering necklace was placed with care. The weight of the backpack became palpable, but it was a weight of hope, not a burden. The next morning, before sunrise, Dr. Vance called. "Mrs. Smith, I've prepared a bank vault in your name and an account for the money transfer. I'll send a discreet car to pick you up at a designated spot, away from the bus, at 8 o'clock. Don't worry about security. It will be an armored vehicle with a trained driver. No one will ask questions." Mary felt immense relief. Dr. Vance had thought of everything. "Thank you very much, Dr. Vance. I will call." She kissed her children, who were still asleep. "Mommy will be back soon. Today is a very important day." The backpack weighed on her shoulders as Mary hurried down the dirt road towards the meeting point. The cold morning air invigorated her. In the distance, a discreet black car awaited her. The driver, a serious man in a suit, opened the back door for her. The ride to the bank was silent, but Mary felt a different kind of tension, an expectation. At the bank, she was led to a private room. Dr. Vance was already waiting for her with a contained smile. "Good morning, Miss Smith. Did you bring the assets?" Mary nodded, and with a careful movement, placed the backpack on the table. The lawyer watched as Mary opened the backpack, revealing its contents. Dr. Vance's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the money and the gleaming jewels. "It's even more substantial than I imagined," she murmured, but her voice was one of admiration, not surprise. "Excellent. We will count and appraise everything immediately, and it will all be deposited in your name and stored in the vault. This is the first step to securing your future." As the bank employees, under the lawyer's supervision, began the meticulous task of counting and cataloguing, Mary watched. The soft rustle of bills being separated and the clinking of jewels were the soundtrack to a new beginning. She felt a tear roll down her face, not from sadness, but from a deep and overwhelming gratitude. Professor Valerius, with his eccentricity and his belief in poetic justice, had fulfilled his promise. Hours later, Mary left the bank, her backpack empty and her heart full. The city seemed brighter, the people friendlier. She had left behind the weight of financial uncertainty and carried with her the certainty that life, after all, would give her a second chance. "Doctor, Vance had ensured that the legal process for validating the will and searching for heirs would begin with the utmost urgency and discretion. "Now, Ms. Smith," Dr. Vance had said before they parted, "the work of proving your worthiness begins. But the most dangerous part, the safeguarding of the assets, is resolved. You can breathe a little easier." Breathe easier. Yes, she could. The journey back to the bus was light. The old vehicle now was no longer just a shelter, but the portal to a new life. Her children awaited her, and Mary could barely wait to tell them that the first major obstacle had been overcome. The future, once an abyss, now stretched before her like a promising path. Mary opened the bus door, and the familiar smell of metal and earth enveloped her. Peter and Anne, who were playing with some twigs on the dusty ground, looked up, their large, curious eyes fixed on her. A wide smile spread across Anne's face, and Peter ran to hug his mother's legs. "Mommy!" Anne exclaimed, her voice full of joy. Mary knelt down, hugging them both tightly. The warmth of their small bodies was a constant reminder of why she fought so hard. "My loves," she said. Her voice choked with emotion. "Mommy has wonderful news. Things are going to change a lot for us, for much, much better." Peter's eyes sparkled. "Are we going to have real food, Mommy, and a soft bed?" Mary laughed, a laugh that hadn't echoed with such lightness in a long time. "Yes, my love, real food and soft beds and a real house. A house with real walls, a roof that doesn't leak, and a bathroom." The mere mention of a real home, something that seemed unattainable just days ago, was now a concrete promise. Mary felt a pang of guilt for not being able to tell them all the details yet, the legal complexities and the magnitude of the inheritance, but she knew the right time would come. For now, the hope in their childlike eyes was the reward she needed. That afternoon, Mary allowed herself a small indulgence. With a portion of the money Dr. Vance had released for immediate expenses, she went to town and bought new clothes for the children, some fresh fruit, bread, and a simple toy for each, a small car for Peter and a rag doll for Anne. Seeing their faces light up upon receiving the gifts was a balm for her soul. The smell of fresh bread and the sweet taste of apples were small luxuries that now seemed grand. Later, as the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple, Mary's phone rang. It was Dr. Vance. "Ms. Smith, the first steps have been completed," the lawyer informed, her voice professional and calm. "The will has been officially filed with the court. We will now begin the public notification process to search for possible heirs, although, as I mentioned, the probability is minimal. Everything will be done with the utmost discretion to avoid any unwanted attention." Mary felt a tightness in her chest. "And how long will that take, Dr. Vance?" "It's hard to say precisely, Ms. Smith. The judicial system has its own rhythms. It could take a few months, perhaps longer, depending on how things unfold and if there are any unexpected challenges. But rest assured, I am monitoring every step." The sound of papers being handled came through the phone. "Meanwhile, I suggest you start planning your next steps. With the funds now secure, we can begin to think about a more suitable place for you and your children. Something temporary, perhaps, while the legal process moves forward. I'd like to find a house to rent, Dr. Vance, something simple but safe, and perhaps a place where the children can go to school." "Excellent initiative. I'll start researching some options for you. And about the bus, Ms. Smith, what do you plan to do with it?" Mary looked at the old vehicle, which seemed even more imposing in the dim light. The broken windows and corroded body were still there, but now she saw more than just ruins. She saw a sanctuary, a refuge, the turning point of her life. "It's part of our story now, Dr. Vance. It's our home. For now, I intend to keep it, perhaps even restore it one day when everything is settled. It saved us." The lawyer paused. I understand. It's a decision that demonstrates the essence of Professor Valerius's will. He would be pleased. As she hung up, Mary hugged her children, who were already dozing off. The bus, with its imperfections, was still her refuge, but the promise of a real home hung in the air. Uncertainty was still a distant shadow, but the light of hope was much stronger. She lay down, the soft sound of the wind rustling the branches of the vacant lot's trees, lulling her thoughts. The path would be long, but each step now led her towards a future she had dared to dream of. Mary snuggled closer to her sleeping children, the warmth of their small bodies an anchor amidst the vastness of her thoughts. The promise of a better future, once a distant whisper, now resonated with the force of a drum in her chest. The path would be long, but each step now led her towards a future she had dared to dream of. The next morning, the sun pierced through the dusty bus windows, painting golden stripes on the floor. Mary woke with renewed energy. The smell of damp earth and warm metal filled the air, a bittersweet reminder of the home that had saved them. She prepared a simple coffee, the aroma of roasted grounds mingling with the morning air, and watched her children play. Peter stacked stones, building a small tower that collapsed with a soft thud, while Anne cradled her rag doll, singing an invented melody. Later that day, Mary called Dr. Vance, who had already compiled a list of rental properties and information about schools in the area. The lawyer was incredibly efficient, and Mary felt immense gratitude for having someone so competent by her side. "Miss Smith, I've found a few options that might be suitable," Dr. Vance said, her voice clear on the phone. "I prioritize safety, proximity to reputable schools, and a quiet environment. The first, I suggest, is a small house on the outskirts of town with a fenced garden. The elementary school is just a few blocks away. Can I schedule a visit for tomorrow?" Mary's heart leaped. "Yes, please, Dr. Vance. I can hardly wait." Anxiety and hope danced in her chest. The next day, Mary left the children with a kind neighbor she had met in town, an elderly woman who sold sweets at the market and who, for some reason, felt an immediate connection with Mary and her children. The sound of the children's laughter echoed through the bus as she walked away, which reassured her. The house was modest, but impeccable. The freshly painted walls exuded a faint smell of fresh paint, and the wooden floorboards creaked softly under her feet. There were 2 bedrooms, a small living room, and a functional kitchen. The garden, though simple, promised a safe space for the children to play. Mary walked through each room, imagining the furniture, Peter and Anne's laughter filling the silence. In the kitchen, she touched the countertop, feeling the solidity of the material. In the living room, sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the space. It was everything she could wish for. "It's perfect, Dr. Vance," Mary whispered, her voice choked. "It's more than I could ever dream of." The lawyer smiled. "I'm glad you like it. I've already arranged the formalities. We can sign the rental agreement tomorrow, and if you wish, the move can be done in a few days." Mary nodded, a silent tear rolling down her face. That was the first concrete step away from the bus, away from uncertainty. In the following days, Mary and Dr. Vance organized everything. The lawyer, with her network of contacts, arranged for a small team to help with the move and the purchase of some essential furniture. Mary dedicated herself to packing the little they owned in the bus, each item laden with memories. She packed Anne's drawings, Peter's small wooden cars, the few pots and blankets. Moving day arrived. A small truck pulled up to the vacant lot, and 2 men began loading the boxes. Mary watched, her heart heavy. The bus, now empty, seemed even larger and quieter. She touched its cold body, feeling the rough texture of the metal. A gentle breeze swayed the torn curtains of the windows, like a farewell wave. "Thank you," she whispered to the vehicle, a deep gratitude for all it had represented. "You saved us." When they arrived at the new house, Peter and Anne ran through the garden, their shouts of joy echoing through the walls. They explored every corner, every room, their eyes shining with the wonder of having a space of their own. Mary watched them, a genuine smile on her face. The scent of a new home, of wood and cleanliness, was a balm for her weary soul. That night, the children slept in soft beds, wrapped in clean sheets. Mary sat on the edge of the bed, watching her children's gentle breathing. The silence of the house was different from the silence of the bus. It was a silence of peace and security. She knew the legal process would still take time, that there would be challenges. But there, in that small house, with her children safe and warm, Mary felt that Professor Valerius had truly fulfilled his promise. Poetic justice had found its home. That morning, the birdsong from the garden was the first sound to invade the house, a soft chorus that replaced the wind's howl and the bus's metal creak. Peter and Anne woke with the sun peeking through the newly installed curtains, their eyes opening to a solid ceiling and walls painted a soft cream. The soft bed cradled them, and a sigh of contentment escaped Anne's lips. Peter jumped out of bed, his bare feet softly thudding on the wooden floor. A radiant smile lit up his face as he ran to Mary's room. "Mommy, Mommy, it's real!" he exclaimed, his voice vibrating with joy. Mary, who was already up, preparing coffee in the functional kitchen, heard the sound of his footsteps and Anne's laughter following him. She smiled, feeling the warmth of the mug in her hands. The smell of coffee mingled with the clean scent of the house, a fragrance of new beginnings. "Yes, my loves, it's real," Mary replied, watching them explore the space with contagious energy. They touched the walls, opened and closed the kitchen cabinet doors, marveling at every detail. The sound of running water from the tap, the soft hum of the refrigerator, everything was new and comforting. In the days that followed, the house filled with life. The children's laughter echoed through the rooms, and the garden, once silent, was now the stage for imaginary adventures. Peter built forts with branches and leaves, while Anne talked to her rag doll under the shade of a small tree. Mary spent her mornings tidying their few belongings, organizing the kitchen, and feeling the peace that each simple task brought her. In the afternoons, she read stories to the children, her voice blending with the soft sound of the wind rustling the garden's tree leaves. Dr. Vance had been tireless. In just a few days, she secured Peter and Anne's enrollment in the local elementary school, just a few blocks away. Their school uniforms, simple and well-kept, awaited in the closet. The day arrived. Mary felt a knot in her throat as she styled Anne's hair and adjusted Peter's shirt collar. "Are you ready for school?" she asked, her voice a little choked. Peter nodded seriously, holding his new backpack. Anne jumped, excited. "We're going to learn new things, Mommy." The walk to school was short, filled with the sounds of the neighborhood waking up, a distant dog bark, a passing car engine, the cheerful chirping of sparrows. Upon arrival, the playground was already bustling with children and parents. The murmur of voices and laughter was a welcoming sound. Mary felt a pang of emotion seeing her children, once so isolated, now part of a group, ready for a new chapter. She hugged them tightly, smelling soap and childhood. "Be brave and have fun," she whispered, kissing their foreheads. As she watched them enter the classroom hand in hand, Mary felt a familiar emptiness in her chest. But this time, it was quickly filled by an overwhelming feeling of gratitude and hope. The tears that streamed down her face were not of sadness, but of relief and deep love. Back in the silent house, Mary sat in the small living room. The silence, once oppressive in other moments of her life, was now a balm. She took the opportunity to organize some documents and make a list of things she needed for the house. The phone rang, and it was Dr. Vance. "Miss Smith," Just a quick update, the lawyer informed. The public notification process is underway. There have been no challenges so far, which is a good sign. The court is following legal deadlines, so we'll still have to wait. I understand, Dr. Vance. Thank you for the information, Mary replied, her voice firm. The waiting no longer scared her. She had a home. Her children were safe and in school. And you, Mrs. Smith? How are you adapting to the new house? We're doing well, Dr. Vance. The children are loving it, and I feel a peace I haven't felt in a long time. It's a new beginning. As she hung up, Mary looked out the window at the garden. She knew the bus, with its corroded body and broken windows, was still there, in the vacant lot. It was an indelible part of her story, a reminder of her lowest point and the miracle that followed. But now, the melody of children playing in the garden, the smell of home cooking in the kitchen, and the soft sound of her children's breathing in their soft beds were the symphony of her present. The house, with its solid walls and secure roof, was more than a shelter. It was the materialization of a dream, the stage for the future she dared to build. Mary found herself alone in the house, the echo of her children's footsteps still resonating in her mind as they headed to school. The silence, once an oppressive burden, was now a blank canvas for new thoughts, a space to breathe and dream. She swept the kitchen floor, the soft swish of the broom on the wooden floorboards, the only sound breaking the quiet. The scent of cleanliness lingered in the air, mingling with the remnants of breakfast. She sat at the table, a notepad and pen in hand. The list of household chores quickly ran out. For the first time in a long time, Mary had no emergency to solve, no crisis to manage. What would she do with this time, with this new freedom? The question hung in the air, almost tangible. She thought of Professor Valerius's words about finding someone worthy. How could she honor that trust? She had always enjoyed cooking, especially sweets. At the market, the woman who sold sweets, Mrs. Davis, had once praised her cupcakes. A faint smile touched her lips. Perhaps she could do something with that. A small business, selling homemade treats. It would be a way to integrate into the community, to create something with her own hands, and to generate an income that didn't solely depend on the inheritance. The faint chime of an idea, like a distant bell, echoed in her mind. That afternoon, when the children returned from school, full of stories about new friends and discoveries, Mary listened to them with a different sparkle in her eyes. She was already thinking about recipes, simple packaging, and the name she would give her small venture. Days turned into weeks. Mary began testing recipes in the kitchen, the aroma of vanilla and cinnamon filling the house. Peter and Anne were her official taste testers, their smiles and thumbs up the best approval. She spoke with Mrs. Davis at the market, who welcomed her with a warm hug and offered practical advice, as well as a small space in her own stall for Mary to start selling. The hum of conversations and the smell of fresh fruit at the market were an invitation to a new world. Dr. Vance called at the end of the second week. "Ms. Smith, I have significant news." The lawyer's voice was more animated than usual. "The deadline for contesting the inheritance has expired. No one has come forward to claim the bus or its contents. The court is ready to issue the final judicial order, recognizing you as Professor Valerius's sole legal heir. This means you will soon have full access to the funds and assets." Mary's heart leapt, a dull thud against her ribs. That's wonderful, Dr. Vance," she managed to say, her voice choked with emotion. The formalization was the last link to uncertainty. That treasure, once a distant hope, was now within her grasp, solid and unquestionable. "There's one more thing," the lawyer continued. "What do you plan to do with the bus? It's still in the vacant lot, and the property owner is eager for it to be removed." Mary had thought a lot about the bus. It had been her refuge, her miracle, her turning point. Selling it seemed like a betrayal. Abandoning it, unthinkable. An idea which had been maturing in her mind finally solidified. "Dr. Vance," Mary began, her voice gaining strength, "I'd like to donate it, but not just any way. I'd like to restore it, transform it into a useful space for the community. Perhaps a small mobile library for children or a support center for vulnerable mothers. Something that honors the professor's memory and what he did for us." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, followed by a soft sigh. "Ms. Smith," Dr. Vance said, her voice tinged with admiration, "that is a truly noble idea. I'm sure Professor Valerius would be immensely proud. I can start researching organizations and budgets for the renovation. It might take some time, but it's perfectly feasible." Mary hung up the phone, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. The bus, which had once been a symbol of despair, would become a beacon of hope for others. She walked to the window, watching the garden where Peter and Anne laughed, stacking stones and talking to their dolls. The afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of orange, and the soft birdsong was the perfect soundtrack for this new chapter. She was no longer the frightened, adrift woman. She was Mary, the woman who built a future, who transformed adversity into opportunity, and who, with every step, honored the unexpected generosity that changed her life. The sound of children's laughter in the garden, the sweet aroma of her culinary experiments, and the promise of a transformed bus were the melody of her new existence. Her new life manifested in every detail of her daily routine. Mary woke to the soft clinking of cutlery in the kitchen as she prepared breakfast. The smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee filled the house, mingling with the sweet aroma of the muffins she was already baking for the market. Mary's days were now a whirlwind of pleasurable activities. Her small kitchen, once just a place to prepare simple meals, had transformed into a laboratory of delights. The oven purred softly, baking batches of honey cookies, cornmeal cakes and fruit tarts, all made with the care and dedication she had always had for cooking. Peter and Anne, before heading to school, gave their verdicts, their eyes shining with each bite. Peter's thumbs up was the most important seal of approval. At the market, the space lent by Mrs. Davis flourished. Mary hung a small, hand-painted wooden sign that read, "Mary's Sweets." The market's buzz, the vendors' calls and people's laughter were the soundtrack to her new venture. Her sweets quickly won over local palates. People stopped, drawn by the irresistible aroma emanating from her stall. "What a wonderful smell!" someone exclaimed, and soon a line formed. Mary, with a gentle smile, handed out the treats in simple but elegant packaging, feeling deep satisfaction with each sale. She wasn't just selling sweets, she was building connections, weaving herself into the fabric of that new community. Meanwhile, the bus project advanced. Dr. Vance called regularly, her voice always filled with enthusiasm. "Ms. Smith, we've found an excellent foundation. Hope on Wheels, which works with mobile libraries for underserved communities. They are very interested in your proposal," the lawyer informed in one of her calls. "The property owner has already been notified, and a removal team is scheduled for the end of the week. The bus will be taken to a specialized workshop." Mary felt a tightness in her chest imagining the bus being moved. It was the end of an era, but the beginning of an even more significant one. She visited the lot one last time, the afternoon sun gilding the rusted body. The bus remained there, a silent guardian of her story. She touched the cold metal, remembering the rainy nights, the fear, but also the discovery that changed everything. A gentle wind rustled the tree leaves, like a whisper of farewell and gratitude. A few days later, Mary took Peter and Anne to see the bus at the workshop. The engine of a tow truck roared as the vehicle was carefully positioned. The smell of grease and metal hung in the air. The place was a construction site, with tools scattered and workers busy on other vehicles. The bus looked small and fragile amidst so much activity, but Mary saw beyond the rust and torn seats. She saw the potential, the promise. "Mommy, it's our bus," Anne exclaimed, pointing. "It's going to be beautiful, Anne. It's going to help many children," Mary replied, holding her daughter's hand. The engineers and designers from the Hope on Wheels Foundation presented Mary with the first sketches. The broken windows would be replaced by colorful glass panels, the body would receive a vibrant new paint job, and the interior, once a jumble of torn seats, would be transformed into cozy bookshelves and small reading nooks with colorful cushions and soft lighting. A small counter would be installed for a librarian and even a sound system for storytelling. Mary was moved when she saw the designs. It was more than she had imagined. The bus wouldn't just be a library, it would be a refuge of knowledge and imagination, a beacon of hope on wheels, carrying stories and dreams wherever it went. Weeks turned into months. Mary's life, balanced between the prosperity of her Mary's Sweets and overseeing the bus project. She felt stronger, more confident. Memories of the past, once haunting, were now just distant echoes, reminders of how far she had come. Her children's laughter, the aroma of cinnamon in her kitchen, the feel of dough in her hands as she shaped a new cookie. All of it was proof that life, even after the greatest storms, always finds a way to blossom. One day, Dr. Vance called with news that made Mary's heart leap. "Miss Smith, the bus is almost ready. The inauguration is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. The foundation would really like you to give a speech as the project's originator." Mary felt a flutter in her stomach, but also a wave of pride. Public speaking was something she never imagined doing. But this wasn't just a ceremony, it was the celebration of a journey, the materialization of a miracle. She accepted, her voice firm, feeling that she was ready for anything. In the days that followed, Mary mentally rehearsed her words, while the scent of burnt sugar and vanilla lingered in her kitchen. She thought of Professor Valerius, of his act of faith and generosity. She thought of her husband, whose memory propelled her, and she thought of Peter and Anne, the reason for her struggle and her greatest joy. The bus, which had once been the symbol of her misfortune, was about to become the symbol of her victory, and she was ready to share it with the world. The big day arrived, bathed in a generous sun that spread a soft, inviting warmth. The municipal park, chosen for the inauguration, was filled with people. Children ran across the lawn, their laughter echoing among the trees, while adults chatted animatedly, an atmosphere of celebration hanging in the air. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy mingled with the fresh aroma of newly mown grass, creating an olfactory symphony of joy. At the center of it all stood the bus, unrecognizable, vibrant, a true kaleidoscope of colors. Its body, once corroded and gray, now sported a deep sky blue, adorned with playful drawings of books floating among white clouds and twinkling stars. The windows, once dark holes, were now colorful glass panels through which sunlight streamed, painting the interior with rainbow hues. An elegant sign, Hope on Wheels, Professor Valerius Library, shone above the windshield, a tribute to the generosity that started it all. Mary felt a mix of nervousness and deep gratitude. Her children, Peter and Anne, ran around the bus, their eyes wide with admiration, pointing at every detail of the new paint job. "Look, Mommy, a flying book," Anne cried, her voice pure joy. Mary smiled, her heart overflowing. Dr. Vance, impeccable in her suit, approached, a warm smile on her face. "Miss Smith, everything is ready. You look stunning." Mary wore a simple yet elegant dress, reflecting the new woman she had become. Her hair, once always pulled back in a hurried bun, was loose, framing a face that bore the marks of an arduous journey, but also the glow of resilience and renewed hope. The ceremony began with a few words from the director of the Hope on Wheels Foundation, who thanked Mary for her vision and donation. Then, Dr. Vance stepped onto the small makeshift stage. "It is with great honor that I present to you the visionary behind this wonderful project, Ms. Mary Smith." A warm round of applause erupted, and Mary felt her legs tremble slightly as she walked to the microphone. She took a deep breath, looking at the crowd, at the transformed bus, at her children who watched her with pride. Her husband's voice, a gentle memory, seemed to whisper in her ear, "You can do it, my love." "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice initially a little shaky, gaining firmness with each word. "Not long ago, this bus was a very different symbol for me and my children. It was a refuge, yes, but a refuge of despair. It was our only home, a makeshift dwelling in a vacant lot after we lost everything." The murmur of the crowd quieted, people listening intently. Mary continued, her voice now clear and strong, laden with emotion, but also with undeniable strength. "This bus, which seemed like the end of the line, became the beginning of a miracle. Inside it, we found not just a material treasure, but an invaluable lesson, that hope can arise in the most unexpected places, and that the generosity of a stranger can transform lives in ways we could never imagine." She paused, her eyes welling up, but the smile on her lips was genuine. Professor Valerius, with his wisdom and altruistic heart, left behind not only a fortune, but a legacy of faith in humanity. Today, this bus is reborn, not as a symbol of misery, but as a beacon of knowledge, imagination, and hope for the children of our community. It will carry stories and dreams wherever it goes, honoring the professor's memory and what he taught us. May this hope on wheels be a reminder that, even in the greatest storms, there is always a path to light. May it inspire every child to dream, to read, to grow, and to believe that life, with all its surprises, always finds a way to blossom. Mary's last words were met with a standing ovation. Loud applause and shouts of "Bravo!" filled the air. People were moved by her story, by her courage, and by the beauty of her vision. Peter and Anne ran to hug her, their small arms squeezing her tightly. That day, Mary was not just the woman who sold Mary's sweets with growing success, nor the loving mother of 2 children. She was the personification of resilience, the architect of a bright future, a woman who transformed adversity into a legacy of hope. The bus, now a sanctuary of stories and dreams, opened its doors, and children rushed inside, their eyes shining before the shelves filled with books. The smell of new paper and the promise of endless adventures filled the air as Mary watched, a serene smile on her face. Her journey had come full circle, and the future, once an abyss of uncertainties, now stretched before her, vast and full of promises.